Welcome to the Jazz Roundtable, brought to you by Live at 0 BPM, with your host, Grammy Award-winning percussionist and mallet player, Billy Holting. Tonight's guest, Terry Gibbs. If you care to donate, click on the donate/tip jar link in the description or on our website at live@0bpm.com/tip jar. You can also tip on Venmo at ZEROBPM. And now, let's get to the music with your host, Billy Holting.
Hey everybody, it's welcome to another Tuesday night Jazz Roundtable. Hey, I'm really psyched about this because our guest tonight, Terry Gibbs, I've been a fan of his for a long time. I've known him for a long time. He's like the greatest cat. He's one of those guys that deserves his own show because he has stories. Now, Terry says he's the oldest living jazz musician from the bebop era. We're going to find out about that. But also, again, we are entirely tip-based, 100% tip-based. So if you care to tip, I'll put the links up in the chat rooms. It's also should be in the descriptions, but if it's not, I'll put it in the chat rooms. You can tip on the website, which goes through PayPal, or you can tip straight through at Venmo. So anyway, let's get to Terry. Let's see, which buttons do I press? And there he is, Terry Gibbs, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Terry?
It's nice to hear applause.
No, the crowd here loves the guests. So
the only one I hear applause from every once in a while, my wife. Every 4 days will applaud something I do.
Well, we'll wait to ask why later on. But I want to jump right into this. You are 97.
I will be 97 in October.
Wow!
And can you imagine that's 3 years close to 100?
I know, that's crazy. And you survived the bebop era.
Well, you know something, Billy? I've never thought of numbers seriously. You know, in our business, let me say one thing. I'm going to change the subject. In our business, let me use Benny Goodman, because I worked for Benny Goodman when I was about 25. Mm-hmm. He was 42. After we played the first 4 or 8 bars, we were the same age. That's the one thing about jazz. There's no number put on. When you hire somebody, they could be 12 years old. You don't hire them unless he can play with you. I have a magazine on my music stand that it was about a picture, and it says, the caption is, "You're only as good as what's behind you," which is true, right, Billy?
That is definitely true, you know.
You can't do without the people with you.
That's great. So you started out you started out on drums, right? Or did you?
Yeah, I started out on xylophones and drums.
Oh, you did?
And then I went and studied timpani and of all the percussion instruments. In fact, I had a scholarship to Juilliard as a snare drummer and timpanist.
And so you were doing classical stuff on the xylophone? Or
Yeah.
All the ragtime stuff as well, or?
No, just classical music. I wasn't even playing jazz, just listening to jazz, but playing it. But I unfortunately I got thrown out of school for hitting a teacher. I was just a young kid, and she should have not fooled me anyhow.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and I went on a road playing drums with big bands when I was about 17, 18, something like that.
Okay, and then when did you make the switch, or when did you start playing violin?
Well, I went in the Army, and I was playing drums with a 38-piece orchestra. We were making movie pictures and all. Mm-hmm. And it was like we had barracks right in Dallas, Texas, and we had about 20 violin players. And violin players are another breed of musician. Mm-hmm. They have their own clique. They do this thing. And there were about 6 of us, 7 of us, that used to like to jam. So that's when I had the vibes there. And we had other drummers, so I let them play drums, and I would play some vibes.
Oh, interesting. And you just picked it up from listening to cats?
Well, yeah, I've always listened. When I was 15 years old, mm-hmm. The name Tiny Khan may not be famous to anybody now, but Tiny was a big influence on every drummer, Mel Lewis, Jeff Hamilton, Frank Cap. You can go down the list of people who play with my band, that style of playing. And Tiny also was probably the most talented arranger who never took a lesson. Yeah. And if you had these people around like Johnny Mandel and Al Cohen, the man of the album, they would have told you they learned arranging from Tiny. And Tiny and I grew up together. I got to tell you this because from 6 years old till I was 19 years old, went in the service. We were together every night. Now I weighed about, I was about 5'7", and weighed about 5'5" rather, and weighed about 87 pounds. And Tiny was about 6'2" and weighed about 300. If you wanted to know what we looked like walking down the street, if anybody knows these names, we looked like Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre walking down the street as 15-year-old kids.
That's funny. And so when you after the war, is that when you started touring with Chubby Jackson?
Yeah, that's what after the war. That's when I came out. Well, Tiny hit me to. I came home on a furlough. There was a record band, by the way, where the musicians couldn't record. And not knowing that there was a Charlie Parker or a Dizzy Gillespie or a Bud Powell or a Max Roach. Well, I never knew these people were around because they couldn't record, but they were playing on 52nd Street and just tearing up New York City. And I came home on furlough, and Tiny told me about a new music called bebop. Now, Billy, that's like me telling some other musician, you want to hear a new music called Slagga Booga Dagga? That's what the name bebop sounded. I said, what the heck is bebop? Now, I gave up playing vibes because I had all this technique, and my idols in jazz were Roy Eldridge and Lester Young, who played so simple and beautiful. I didn't know what to do with the technique. And when I heard Bird and Diz, I seriously had what you call a little nervous breakdown. Seriously. Wow. I found Shangri-La, something I've been looking for all my life. And luckily I have good ears and good memory, and got onto the bebop language fast, and got in with that whole crowd of people.
Now, were you sitting in with them or just?
No, they, believe it or not, Bird came down and sat in with me one time.
Oh, wow.
And later on I got to work opposite Bird and Diz at Bird when I became a bit of a band leader. I worked opposite. Then I worked with, believe it or not, when I was out here living in California and conducting my television show. I had about 10 days off, and Dizzy called me. I was at my music store. He said, James Nudie just had a Bell palsy stroke. You want to come play with me, please? I was here before he even hung up the phone. Wow. Now, because he worked opposite of me. And Billy, you don't know what somebody can do until you work with them. You can hear them play a million times, buy their records, but unless you play with them every night and play the same songs, and you hear different composing every night, because jazz is instant composing.
Right.
When I take a song like Stella by Starlight and take those chord changes, and every time I play 18 choruses, every chorus is like another song, then I know what I'm doing.
That's cool. So I imagine when you were playing opposite Parker and Diz, what were they like? Did you hang out with them at all, or were you just?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you what. Let tell you I had two Charlie Parker songs. It's in my book. Let me hang up, and it's probably nobody. It's my daughter, and I'll call her back later. My daughter keeps checking up on me every day to see if I'm still alive.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the first time with Charlie, I'll take it. I don't want to elongate my story, and they're all in my book, by the way.
Oh right.
I have an autobiography out, and these stories. I'll tell you, it's a wild story. Bird, I was just about. Let me see. This is about 1947. I was a young kid still learning bebop. And Charlie Parker was a big jive. We all knew he was a junkie, but Bird was the greatest musician that ever lived to me. But he can con you into things that you wouldn't believe. When he used to walk out of Birdland, he'd say, "Hey, give me a quarter or give me $1." And you'd say, "I don't have any money, I can't give it." He said, "Well, where are you working tomorrow night?" And he'd say, "I'm working over here, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "I'll come and sit in with you." So you give him the money. He'd never show up. The place would be packed, but he'd never show up. So I walk, and I'm very vocal. I mean, especially those days, I was vocal with Charlie Parker and go. Anyhow, I come out of the club and he asked me for $1, and I told him off bad. I said, the greatest musician in the world begging. I said, you're ashamed, this and this. I went through you won't believe it's like a father telling his son off as a kid. And so he said, where are you playing tomorrow night? And I would say, at Georgia Old Simpan Alley. I said, I'll come sit in with you. I knew he wasn't going to sit in with me, but I gave him $1. The next night, we're in places, because people used to hear about Bird's going to come sit in, or Bird's going to be here, Bird's going to be there. And so we're starting our first song, which was Out of Nowhere, and the place is packed. It was, they were all small club, but the place was packed. We played 16 bars of the song, and all of a sudden, Bird walks in with alto sax, coming with the second 16 bars of Out of Nowhere, and he started playing. Now, those days, guys like Bird and Diz and Bud Powell used to play like 30 choruses at a time sometimes. Time meant nothing to those people. They stay on stage an hour and a half sometimes. They wouldn't care. And so he kept, when it came to the Out of Nowhere has 32 bars.
Yeah.
So on the 30th bar, I bent down to tie my shoe, and I wanted to make sure that he was still playing on the first bar. Then I stood up. On the 30th bar of the next chorus, I bent down and tied my shoe and unloosened something on my vibes. Billy, it was about 16 choruses that I was on the floor on the 30th bar of every chorus he played. If you would ask me, would I rather follow Charlie Parker or fight Mike Tyson, I would say Mike Tyson, one punch, you're out there. Standing there having a heart attack, waiting for Bird to get up because I got to follow him. And about the 17th chorus, my piano player looks at me on the ground. He says, I know what you're doing. I'm not going to follow him either. We were like scared rabbits. Now, my second thing, I tell you, I got to, 7 years later, or so I got to playing fairly well. I got to, let's face it, in 7 years, if you don't learn, you're give up and become a shoemaker. So anyhow, a new club opened up, which was close to Berlin, called the Bandbox. Billy Eckstein, who was very hot at the time, he was like the #1 singer. Bill was Billy Eckstein, Harry James and his band featuring Buddy Rich, and the Terry Gibbs Quartet. For a month booking. About after 3 days, Monty Kay, the man who owned the club, who came over to me, he said, hey, Terry, we're bringing Bird out of the hospital and he wants to play with you. I said, he wants to play with me? How about play with Buddy Rich or Billy X? I know he wants to play with you. Anyhow, Bird played with me for a month, and he was the most gracious person. Every time I asked him what he wanted to play, he said, anything you play, Terry, I'll just jump in. Anything you want to play, I'll just jump in. Bird was a very intelligent guy, and unfortunately, he was a bad junkie.
Yeah, that is tragic. But who
and to me, he was. There are two geniuses to me, and I'll tell you why I call him it. He's the only jazz musician, and I'll can tell you why if you ask me why he is the only genius. And George Gershwin is my other genius that I love.
Okay, well, why?
I'll tell you why. Okay. Now, Dizzy Gillespie, who I probably learned more at the beginning from, because as a drummer, Dizzy played very syncopated. If you took the notes away from Dizzy's playing, you'd hear bop, 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 bop. If you put the notes, you'd hear those. Mm-hmm. So as a drummer, I could pick up the syncopation, but it took a while to get the harmony and theory goes, right? So Gibbs was that good. Now, Art Tatum, who in the 30s was probably the greatest piano player who ever lived, it didn't make any sense how good he was, but he was so harmonically and technically so far ahead of everybody that he changed chord changes all over the place. So with Dizzy, you could have said that maybe his sound wasn't as good as Freddie Hubbard, or maybe, just maybe. Mm-hmm. And with Art Tatum, you could have said maybe because he was technically and harmonically so great, well, that maybe he was a little cold. Maybe because he would kept changing every two beats. He kept changing the thing, you know. But with Bird, I couldn't find a maybe. Everything he did was perfect.
Mm.
Even when he recorded Lover Man having a nervous breakdown, that's one of the greatest choruses I ever heard, Lover Man, in my life.
Wow, that's great. And so now, who was in that quartet when you were doing that?
I had Terry Powell. Oh, in that band,
Mm-hmm.
it really wasn't one of my better rhythm sections, but I had New York guys, you know, who played with me at the
Right.
time. Those days, they would make me band, and I put a little band together until I got that group with Terry Powell for about 4 years. We would travel the whole country. And we worked 50 some odd weeks a year.
Yeah. Well, I read in your bio you had a sextet with Louis Bellson and Charlie Shavers.
Yeah, that we had a second. I was with Tommy Dorsey for about 10 minutes,
Mm.
and I joined the band and flew out, went out. I took a train for 5 days out to California. I played about a song or two, and then quit the band because I was learning bebop, and they're playing Song of India and all those. So I told my one, well, if that's the whole story, again, I'd have to stretch out. You don't want to hear that one. But anyhow, I was 10 minutes. But I met Louis Belson, and we became very good friends. And Charlie Shavers, they were on the band.
Mm-hmm.
And when they left the band, they came to New York, and we met each other in the street, and we started talking. We said, why don't we start a band together? And we started a band, and we hired Oscar Petrovic, probably one of the greatest bass players that ever played the bass, and Lou Levy on piano,
Wow.
the monster, and a guy called Jerry Winters on clarinet, very good clarinet player, and we kept the band together about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think a lot of us musicians would love to hear what the vibe was really like back in the day, because you guys were playing 6, 7 nights a week, right?
Well, actually, Frank DeVito,
Uh huh.
the drummer, who was my band for 2 years, put our itinerary for 1 year. He put it on Facebook, and we worked 50 weeks out of the whole year. We finished in Pittsburgh at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was the band leader. I drove the cars. I packed up the instruments because we go out for 6 months at a time. So we were loaded with like
Right.
checking into a house for 6 months. And so we go on a road, and we finish Pittsburgh on Sunday night, and leave about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and maybe get to Toronto in time, maybe in time to check in. If not,
Mm-hmm.
right to the club. Get up and go to the men's room because we had uniforms. We all
Right.
wore dark suits. We went on stage always dressed to kill.
Yeah.
And we knew what we were going to do because these people worked with me for 4 years, you know. So we knew what we do, but no sleep. We just, the whole thing was, Billy, we were all in our 20s, and I still feel the same way. But in our 20s, all we cared about was playing music.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't care about sleeping on the floor, sleeping in
Right.
the car, driving 5,000 miles to get to the job, finish your job, get in the car, run back. We just, when we got on stage, we were Hercules.
Yeah.
That's where we were happiest.
So, were you doing one nighters or week?
No clubs. 2 weeks at a club,
Oh, okay. Well,
3 weeks club,
that's better
one
than
week
one
at a club.
nighter.
Well, it was the greatest because in nightclubs, I work very loose. I don't know what I'm going to say. I know we're going to play, but I like that fun. I like the guys to have fun. If they have something silly to say, I'll be the best straight man in the world. But don't fool with the music. And I work loose, and we get on stage and have fun playing music. That was the whole big thing. Everybody's they have fun. I told you before that I've written about 200 songs,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 300 songs, because I recorded about 200 and some odd songs in about 80 CDs that I've done.
Yeah.
And I wrote all those songs for me to play. I wrote chord changes that I want to play on, and melodies that I want to hear. I didn't know that later on that Nat King Cole and Cannonball Adderley and Woody Herman and George Shearing and Buddy DeFranco, and go down the line, about 10, 15 people recorded my songs, hearing me play the song. I never knew that was going to happen, but I wrote those songs for me to play on because, like I said, Stella by Starlight, that's one of my favorite songs to play on because they're great chord changes to write a song on, to improvise on,
Right.
you know? We can all play the blues. By the way, if you can't play the blues, you can't play jazz. You're not a good jazz player.
Right.
But playing Stella by Starlight is an art in itself.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite song that you wrote? One that really just stands out to you?
No, I like the songs that I've written some like the blues, funk tunes. I got rhythm chord changes, a whole bunch of things. But I like the songs where the chord changes got a little more involved.
Hmm.
Nothing out. All
Right.
my chord changes, the chord changes resolved. If it was an F minor 7 to B flat 7, we went into E flat.
Right.
If it was a D minor 7 to G 7, we went into C.
Hmm.
And in fact, I'm going to show you this now. I'm going to bring it up. My son recorded 18 of my songs.
Right.
And the album will be out in August. Now you gotta. I'll read you the personnel. Oh yeah, can you see the personnel here?
You can kind of see it's a little. I can read it.
I'll read the
Yeah, do
personnel.
that.
Well, first of all, the AC My Song. It's called "Songs for My Father." He's got Chick Corea, who recorded his last thing he ever did, doing 4 or 5 of my songs with Ron Connor and Jerry playing drums. Then he got Kennedy Barron and Buster Williams and Jerry playing drums doing 5 of my songs.
Uh-huh.
And Patrice Rushing and Larry Golding doing 4 or 5 of my songs. And Jeff Keeler and Christian McBride doing 4 or 5 of my songs.
Wow. And it's called
And, and,
Songs
and
from My Father.
songs from my father. Horace Silver wrote songs for my father.
Hmm.
But by the way, Horace Silver once worked to my dad.
Well, when it's out, we'll send a link out on the in the newsletter. The newsletter we send out once a week. So, but I want to take a minute here. We have a few people in the rooms and that want to say hi. So, Island Voyage Steel Drum Band says great guest. Any mallet players idol? Thank you, Terry. And also Taylor Hatch says Terry, this is great. So, and then we have Howard had a comment. He said, "I'm looking forward to listening to what Terry Gibbs says. I met him when I was 14 years old at Mel Zelnick's music stop."
Wait,
Mel,
wait, it was Terry Gibbs and Mel Zell. It was my store with Mel Zelnick running it.
okay,
Mel, we were partners.
okay. But he said,
What's the kid's name?
Howard Lubin.
Howard, remember that it was my store.
I remember the music stop. I wonder if it's still there. It's here in the
No,
valley,
no,
very
we
famous.
sold it. I gave it. You know what I gave it to Mel for? I only went with because my name to start with. I was too busy to be there because I was conducting a television show. I would go there and hang out. It was a good hangout for me. And it was one of these things.
Hmm.
Um, and so I gave him the store for a set of vibes that we had in the store.
Hmm.
Another Deegan set to take home. I had 5 of them already, but I took another one home and I gave Mill the store
Nice. That's a good. So now, when did you move out to LA?
in 1957.
Okay. And who are you playing with then? Or is that when you started doing the TV?
Actually, I came out here. I tell you, it's wild.
Okay.
I came out to California because I had that group with Terry Pollock for 4 years, and we were wiped out. It was like almost like exhausted to have a nervous breakdown. 50 weeks a year, 52 weeks a year, sometimes for 4 years in a row.
Hmm.
And so I figured I'm going to come out to California and do some studio work.
Hmm.
And the first guy when I got here was Emil Richards, who called me and says he came because I told him, because he studied with me
Hmm.
back in about 1950, 1940, 1950. He studied with me in New York. And so he brought about 10 different parts of music, of different things that he did, playing a movie picture, playing a jingle, playing you name it, all different kinds of music that I have to read and play
Hmm.
to do these things. And so anyhow, the first person I called was a guy called Al something, who was the contractor at NBC.
Hmm.
And I called him because I think he once played drums with my father. and I said I wanted to go on staff. You have a part for me?
Hmm.
And so he says, let me give you a call. I'll find out. In the meantime, I heard that if you were on staff, you can't play in jazz clubs. See, the union was very strong. They wanted to spread the work around. And so all the studio guys were the best jazz musicians.
Hmm.
Guys out here like Bud Shank and Connie Condoli and Pete Condoli, all the heavyweight players out here were on staff. Larry Bunker. And uh, you couldn't play in a jazz club. So Al Lappin called me back. He said, listen, I'm going to put you on staff. So I had to get out of it. I didn't know what to do. So I said, well, Al, I have to have a double check. And he on the phone, I thought he was going to break my ears. He says, well, you little cocker, a double check. Well, I got an 82-piece band on staff, and the only two people getting a double check is Conrad Gaza, who was the number one trumpet player in California, and Irv Cotler, the drummer who wound up playing with Frank Sinatra his whole life. They're the only ones getting a double, and he hung up on me. So now I felt better. He things. So then he called me back about a day later. You won't believe it. He says, "You little cocker." He says, "You know what? I'm gonna put you on staff." And I knew why, but then I had to tell him the truth that Al, I'm not ready to give up playing jazz.
Hmm.
And I know the reason why he put me on, because those days NBC had the Dinah Shore show, the Dean Martin show, all these variety shows,
Hmm.
and they could have put me on as a guest without paying me any money because I was on staff. I was already there.
Oh,
They
right,
could have
right.
put me on. So so he was smart, but he understood that I wanted to play jazz, and so I never went on staff, or I didn't want to, and I didn't like doing studio work. I hated to go to a few. I went to do a date or two, and yet there was a band leader there, and he was having trouble with some kind of. And you know what? If I would have said, make that an E flat, that would have solved the whole problem. But they don't want it. They don't want you to do that because they want to spend as much time in the studio going overtime.
Oh,
Let him try to work it out. Even if it takes an hour and a half. Wait, don't you say E flat. Let him find the E flat.
oh, wow.
And so it was no fun, Billy. And
Yeah, I get it.
I was used to being a band leader anyhow.
Well, you moved out here in '57, you said, and then in '59 you started the Dream Band.
That was a fluke. I didn't start a band.
Oh.
I wrote about that in my book, and I'll tell you how it started. I recorded a big band in New York, which I wasn't happy about. The drummer I had, Jerry Siegel, was in my little group. Great little band drummer, but not every little band drummer could play with a big band. And I wanted to use the same people in my little band doing a big band album because it wouldn't have been fair. They're traveling here with me, sleeping on the floor, doing this. And so we recorded the first few tunes, and the drummer, Billy, is the leader of a band.
Hmm.
Without a drummer, you don't have a band. Benny Goodman had Gene Krupa. Tommy Dorsey had Buddy Rich. Artie Shaw had Buddy Rich. Davey Tough and Woody Herman. Every band leader who was successful, their drummer was the best thing happening. Joe Jones with Count Basie. Sonny Payne with Count Basie. The drummer is the leader of any band you play because he's the most important. And so, what the hell was I talking about? I'm going into every direction but the question you asked. Oh, yeah, the Dream Band.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, I went down, while I was here, I went down and heard Bill Holman rehearsing a band at the Union. And I heard and what they used to do, Bill Holman and Ned Flory, they would write arrangements and they wanted to hear it played. So they rehearsed a band at the Union. I went down and heard how great they sounded. And I got that feeling of a big band again. And I got an idea. You have to have an idea when you do something, some kind of premise. We're going to take two tunes from each band leader that made, like Tommy Dorsey, Artie Shaw made Stardust, his chorus made Stardust famous. Lionel Hampton had the Illinois You Can't Play Flying Home, his chorus was made it famous. The Tommy Dorsey theme song was famous. I took 6 different band leaders and took 2 tunes that they made famous and hired 6 arrangers to write each tune. I sort of sketched with them what I wanted, because when I was in the army, I used to write arrangements, so I sketched what I wanted with them. They wrote the arrangements. They had full freedom to write what they wanted to, but I actually told them what I was looking for. When you take Artie Shaw's chorus out of there, put it out, the arrangement you're going to write for me on Stardust, and I'm going to play vibes with the saxophone chorus, the clarinet chorus rather. I'm going to play it with the saxophones. And on Illinois Jacquette's chorus, I'm going to play with the saxophones, or whoever you write for me to play with, because the vibes, they never had any section to play with. So I patterned the band after Benny Goodman, in and out, with a lot of ensemble, Billy. Because I always thought a big band should have a band, not 84 million solos, but a band.
Right.
And I lucked out by having 6 of their greatest arrangers. Now I got the arrangements, and I was going to rehearse at the Union for the record date. Now I heard that Pete Rugolo, a very famous arranger, who wrote for Stan Kenton and wrote a lot of movie theme songs, he got fined $1,000 for rehearsing for a record. They wanted you to make overtime. The whole thing was making overtime for the musician. So now I had all this music written, and I couldn't have no place to rehearse. I got all of my big band thing. And anyhow, some movie columnists liked what I did, and she had me go to a club that was going to close called the Seville. Mm-hmm. The owner said I tried country and western, I tried Latin, I tried everything. And so she talked him into hiring me to play jazz. So my first group I had there was Stan Levy on drums, Charlie Hayden on bass, Russ Freeman on piano, and Connie Cadoli, myself. Wow. We went in for a few weeks, and then I heard from somebody that you could rehearse for a job. Oh. So I said to the owner, and I was an out-of-towner, so I was getting more than Scale, so I could pay. Because Scale was $15 a man those days. Mm-hmm. That was 1959, because with $15 you could rent a room for the week, And so I went to the owner. I said, "How'd you like to have a big band for what you're paying me for 15 guys?" "I don't care, because we don't do business. I'm closing anyhow." So I got a chance to rehearse for the job, and we were going to play that one night. I rehearsed for the job, and Steve Allen, who was just a friend of mine then, gave me a plug on he was on NBC, and we just told musicians. We expect about 20, 30, 40. Big bands were not in, by the way, because Dave Brubeck was making as much money for a quartet as Count Basie was for the whole band. So big bands were not in. And so we didn't expect any people there. So came into work we recorded all day, came into work about, we had to start at 10 o'clock. We came into work about 9 o'clock to go in the back room, and only had 12 arrangements to play for 3 shows, and they were 4-minute arrangements. I said at letter A, Conte, you got 1,000 choruses. Letter B, Frank Rossellino, you got 100 million. I was opening everything up to give my chorus. Each song that was normally 4 minutes would be about 8 or 9 minutes. Oh. So I have enough songs to play for a set. And we walked out out of the dressing room to go play, and the place was mobbed, packed with people. I saw a whole bunch of musicians that I didn't believe were there, from in town here, and movie people. Wow. If people know Fred McMurray and June Haver and Jerry Lewis and Soupy Sales, the place was packed with all celebrities. And so I took the band. It was a joke. I took the band back in the dressing room. I said, "Gentlemen, we're starting a band tonight." I just said that for laughs. I don't want to start a band. And the first rule is there's no drinking off the bandstand. You want to drink, you got to drink on stage. We're going to have a party. And I said the second rule is hurry up and relax. So you wouldn't believe how funny it was. There were 300 people packed in the place, and we're about ready to play maybe the second or third song, and Ned Flory stood up and said, "Hey, Jerry, I need a beer." So we stopped. I stopped. "Hey, waitress, we need a beer." I think all 5 waitresses on stage so we could get a drink in the audience. They were all on stage. We were having so much, but it was packed. So anyhow, the guy, club owner said, let's try it again next week. Once again, we came at about this time. By this time, Bill Holman gave me a few arrangements, and Ned Floor. These guys were so happy to be playing with a big band
Hmm.
because all of them had big band in series, but no place to play.
Wow.
No place to play at all. Al Porcino, best lead trumpet player in the world. He can't play no jazz at all, but played lead trumpet. He's a champ. Where is he going to play? There's
Yeah.
no band. He was the happiest to be in the band. Mel Lewis, the same thing. Big band drummer, the best. And so uh, we next week we go in at 9:30. We're gonna go in the band room. 30 people. We figured it's a fluke, you know. We lucked out. We had fun. We go to the band room to talk about what we just got in arrangements. We walked out once again, packed with a line waiting to get in. Now, Billy,
Wow.
it didn't make sense. You know, and we were like the hit of the town, and the scale was $15. After I paid the band boy as a band leader, I made $11. Not bad for a band leader.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe, but we had more fun than anybody. This went on for about like 4 or 5 weeks, and then the club owner says, "You want to try it 5 nights a week for a few weeks?" I said, "Yeah," not realizing that when 2 weeks from then, when we were going to start it, Count Basie was opening up about 4 blocks away at the Crescendo with his big band. We figured, oh hell, this is gonna be the biggest bomb in the world. We went in there, and I swear, Bill, we outdrew Basie.
Wow.
His whole band was there on their intermissions. Joe Williams, because I knew the band because I was on tour with them. Sonny Payne, Frank Ford, everybody in that band came over to hear our band because they heard about it in New York. It's wild. So that's how the band started. Then we started to play. You know, everybody was having so much fun. It was fun time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've actually played a bunch of those charts. There's a big band here at one of the local colleges, and I got to go be you for a night and play a bunch of
Well, a
those
lot
charts.
of my arrangements have been sold to a lot of the colleges.
Yeah, and Day In, Day Out is one that I also play with the Ron Jones
Yeah,
band. But the
right.
thing that I liked about, if you haven't heard the albums and the things, is it isn't Terry Gibbs all the time. It isn't. It's the arrangements are really
No,
great 'cause
it's
it
a
really is
band.
a band. It's a band sound. You're right. It is.
There
And
was an 8-bar trumpet solo, this and this. I patterned it after the Benny Goodman band because, like I said, I had no section to play with. Like if you were a trumpet player, you could play with the trumpet section,
right.
or a saxophone player. So Benny Goodman played in and out, but I like band. But one of the qualifications with the rangers I hired, well, no matter what they wrote, they had to give me 2 minutes of ensemble on the end. I
Yeah.
wanted every song to be a closing song. Give us a two chorus ensemble, and that's what made it. That's why the people loved the band. They loved that this every soloist, guys like Connie Cadoli, Frank Rossellino, Richie Camuca, Carl Fontana, Stu Williamson, Lou Levy, Joe Maney, Charlie Kennedy. I can go down the band, Bill Holman. These were the greatest soloists,
Yeah.
but the band was the important thing. I learned that from Woody Herman, by the
You
way.
can really hear that in the arrangement. So I'm going to go back to the web because we have some other people that have comments and some questions also. But April says that she met Terry at a gig he did at KRML in Carmel, interviewed him on her old show at KAZU in Pacific Grove, spent some time with him again at a party for Jack Sheldon. Each time was a great evening. So thanks for writing in, April. And then
I once played Carmel, where what's his name, Clint Eastwood came in to see me with his wife, and he loved Nancy. He took his wife home intermission and came back as himself for the second set, and then we hung out. Because I knew Clint. He loves jazz, Except he ruined that picture of Bird. Terrible. Terrible.
Oh.
All he talked about was Bird making junk. He never talked about the genius of it. Anyhow, good, Billy.
Well, and then John Mathis says he just bought the book. So you got a book sale tonight. So that's
You
awesome.
know, it came, Billy. I got to tell you some funny story about the book. I wrote the book. It's very anecdotal. I wrote every word in that book. I sat with it when I was asked by the publisher to write. I sat here in my place where I'm sitting now, with a jazz historian, Carrie Janelle, who written a few books, and he gave me some pointers. But I wrote every story myself.
Mm-hmm.
Every story. Was that a gong we just got?
That's not on my end.
Like, well, like somebody, but Major Bo's giving you a gong, you're out. But anyhow, I'm sitting here. I wrote every word in that book, and then I get called by people, and they say, "Mr. Gibbs, what's your book?" And I said, "Here's a phone number where you can get it, or maybe you can get it on Amazon." And after maybe about a few months, I get a call from this guy. He says, "My name is this," and I forget his name. I'm with ASCAP. I'm calling to tell you that your book won the ASCAP Dean Sailor Award, the best book of the year. So I said to him, "Tell your mother I said hello," and I hung up on him. I thought he put me on. I mean, why would my book win? I got thrown out of school. I couldn't even spell the word cat. I wrote every word in that book. It's how I talk to you right now, and
Right.
and so I waited about 10 minutes after I said that, and I called somebody in New York who was a friend of mine at ASCAP, who I know. I said, this guy just called me and said my book won the award. Some idiot called me. He said, "No, you did win. That was Ted calling you to tell you about your book. We want to fly you in and present you with that award." I said, "Give me his name. I got to call him back and apologize." I let him get on my hands and knees, but he's in New York. I'm in California. You have to have long hands and long knees.
That's and now when you guys all go out and buy the book out there at internet land, you'll know what happened, and you'll know.
Well,
an extra
you know
story
what?
about it.
It's actually the book sold. It's still selling in hardcover, which is
Wow.
wild. But you
And
know
now
what
you
they've
have
done, which I don't. They've raised the price of the book, which is terrible.
yeah.
I don't know why.
Who knows?
Anyhow,
But
that's the
but I
book
have
is
some
out.
questions. Taylor, who is he's at North Texas State. I guess it's now University of North Texas. He has a couple of questions. Let me see if I can find those. Well, first he says he thinks you played a concert with the 1 o'clock lab band
Yes,
10 years
I
ago.
did. That band was good enough to take on a road right there. In fact,
Now,
there was a mallet player called Jay Garrett, who became a very good friend of mine.
mm,
Who's now and we made a deal. We moved out to California. He would be my band boy, and I would give him lessons. He's now a teacher teaching uh, school somewhere in Tennessee. But he was in North Texas in that band.
that's very cool. Okay, but Terry has some questions. One, he wants to know, do you have a favorite gig or record that you ever played?
Should I tell you something, Billy? After I record something,
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. I hated it for the first 6 months. And the biggest drag is the last 20, 30 albums I produced myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go in a booth and sit there, and all of them are live. You can't edit. They're live or live in the studio, but
Mm-hmm.
live.
Right.
No edit because we played for 3 days with that group, rehearse, play in the club, or wherever we're doing it, and then record for 3 days. And so you have to take the best take. But you listen after listening to for 8 hours a day to your
Uh-huh.
own playing, you say, "God, give me another. Let somebody else play my chorus." But and then 6 months later, I listen. I say, that wasn't too bad. Buddy DeFranco and I, who played together for 20 years, we were both the same way. Every time we recorded, Buddy didn't want to hear a playback, and I didn't want to hear a playback. We didn't want to do it, and we didn't like the record. And then this is Buddy had been gone a while. I called him one time about 6, 7 months after we recorded that thing. We're ready to go travel somewhere again, all over the world. And I hear music in the background. I said, "What is that, Buddy?" He says, "That's the song, the album we did." I said, "You're listening?" He goes, "Yeah, it doesn't sound bad to me now." And we both hated it. He wouldn't even listen to the playback, and I didn't like it either. It's wild. You don't know the thing is, when you really start liking what you did when you did it, and
Mm-hmm.
don't think maybe you could have done better, then you're okay musician. You're not. If you don't think you could have done better, and you could have done better,
Yeah.
with every, I don't make up choruses. Whatever comes out of my dumb head comes to
Uh-huh.
my mallet and goes to the vibes.
Uh-huh. Well, let's talk about that because you and Buddy played together for 18 years, and I actually saw you two play in Kalispell, Montana. Where I was doing a gig that night on the same stage right before you guys, and
Yeah, I remember seeing you there.
it's a funny story. I'm up there and I'm playing, and I hear this voice off to the side of me yelling something, and I can't. While I'm playing, I'm trying to figure out. I can't understand what
Were
he's
you
saying.
and Lou Rawls at the time?
Yeah, I was. And I get done and I look over and you're standing there and you're like going, nice choruses. And I'm like, I couldn't hear that word while I was playing. So, and then you guys went
Well,
on after us and it was a fantastic show. It was,
I love complimenting people after they do something. I did one thing. Elliot Lawrence, had a jazz band in the old days,
Mhm.
was conducting uh, Broadway shows, and he conducted the Tony Awards one time, and I conducted television, and he did such a great job because I hate when the thing ends and it's about 5 seconds in between the music coming in for the playoff. It
Mm.
should be end music, end music. And he did such a great job that I called him about 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, which had to be about 6 o'clock in the morning, New York, and woke him up to tell him how great he did a job. I had to do that.
Mhm.
I did that with Bob Florence one time
Oh, yeah.
after hearing his record.
Cool. I'm going to take a second now, and just so people out there, we have some new people that haven't been to the show, and I want to say thank you. Andre and Fred already tipped. Andre is one of our regulars, and he comes and he tips all the time, and we really appreciate that. I've got those links up in the room. Again, we are 100% tip based. So anything.
Hey, everybody, Billy works very hard. I know what he does to put this together. Send him something because it's not fair if you don't.
But
Because
I'm going to just talk about some upcoming shows we have coming up here. And let's see. So this Thursday night, we do jazz shows every Thursday night. Nick Gomez is a young tenor player here in town, and Michael O'Neill is a very famous guitar player is playing with them. That's going to be fun. Dave Hill Group. That's Dave Hill, Greg Karukas, Joel Taylor, and Steve Billman. That is an amazing group. Then we're going to have Jazz Roundtable number 10, which I think is actually going to be the 20th. I'm still waiting to solidify some guests for that. And then Acoustomania, they're going to be fun. That is Don Randy from the Baked Potato and the Wrecking Crew fame, and John DePatty. They do a duet. That's going to be exciting. Brad Rebuchin Trio is coming in, and the Paul Paris Project is coming back. He came in before with an all-star lineup. And Kerry Frank had to move his gig. I had to change the graphic, but anyway,
hey, how
that's
come you don't get the Mormon Tabernacle Choir also?
because we
God.
can't fit them all in my studio. We could maybe
Anyhow,
get
go ahead.
15 of them in there. I wonder if they could do it. Maybe we could
What's
revote
that?
the rest of them.
The Mormon Tabernacle, you never have anybody be able to follow it.
Anyway, we've been having a lot of fun. We started this back in June. But anyway, I want to talk about one thing because this is something that not that many people know about you. And you were kind of instrumental or very instrumental in helping break down the sex barrier in jazz because you had Terry Pollard that played with you and Pat Moran, and you've got a story about Alice McLeod we want to hear also. But tell me about Terry Pollard. You told me something about her earlier.
Well, the wildest thing with Terry Powell, this is 1953, where there was a cliche about there were girl piano players like Marion McPartland, Barbara Carroll, but there was a cliche. They were good for a girl. They didn't have that bebop language. They played the piano well,
Mm-hmm.
but they were like almost like cocktail piano players. But they were good piano players. And so, I had Horace Silver on my band, and people. I had Bud Powell play for me. I had some. I got made a band leader early there in my young days, so I hired everybody who was good that was out of work.
Right.
So now I go to Detroit. I just had a job, went to Detroit, it was a regular group, and my day off, one of the guys I was in the army band with came down to see me. He was living in Pontiac, Michigan. And we said, what are we going to do now? By the way, Dizzy Gillespie, before that, about maybe 6 months before, he told me, he says, we were talking about music, and then Terry, there's that trumpet player. If you ever get to Detroit, he'll knock you out. His name is Thad Jones. Nobody knows who he is, but he's that great. Anyhow, I forgot that completely. I forgot it all. I get to Detroit, and it's our day off, and let's go have some music. So where do we go? We look at the paper, but to get the name of the club, look, it said Thad Jones. I said, you know what? I think that's the name that Dizzy Gillespie told me about. Let's go there. We went there, and it was a band of unknowns. And they just stayed in Detroit. Of Elvin Jones on drums, Billy Mitchell on tenor, this little girl Terry Pollen on
Mm-hmm.
piano, and I being somebody on bass. And it was all Thad Jones playing, all the music people. It was great, and every time they came to the piano chorus, I was hearing a piano coming from a girl that I never heard that kind of articulation and the dirt and how all she played as good as Thad Jones and everybody in that band. And so I when they got off the stage, I went over and I said, "This my name is Terry Gibbs. I live in New York, and I have some would start a band from New York. Would you like to join my band?
Hmm.
And would you like to play?" No, I said, "Would you like to play for me? Not join my. Would you like to play for me or just sort of audition?"
Mm-hmm.
So she said, "Yeah." Anyhow, so I picked her up the next day. Two guys who played. We went to the club, and when I auditioned somebody, I got rhythm or blues changes. Nothing out so that
Right.
so they have to guess. That's the I want to hear them play. And she played the blues. She played the heck out of them. Really play. I'm talking about somebody who I wanted to hire immediately. Then she says to me, "I play vibes also." Now I started a vibe duet with Don Elliott
Mm-hmm.
years before that, uh, and that's what got me a lot of work in New York because we closed every show by playing a vibe. He played mellophone in the band, and
Mm-hmm.
then he played vibes. She said I play vibes. So I figured, wow, I don't care if she doesn't have to play good. Or I'll teach her some handshake, and if she plays, I'm not going to try to cut her. I'm just going to, it'd be nice, especially those days, a black girl. Well, I never thought about being black. She was just another person
Mm-hmm.
who could play that great, and myself, I would tear up the place. And so I played some piano chord change. Once again, I got the blues. And I'm telling you, Billy, when she played the vibes, I didn't believe it. She played as good as I just played when I got off just then. So it didn't make sense. So I hired her, went to New York City. Well, first of all, first she didn't want to, she'd never been on the road with a white band to start with, so she didn't want to go on the road to start. So there was a guy who was wrote for the newspaper. There was a big international writer, big
Mm-hmm.
jazz fan, and he was in town. So I called him. I said, "Listen, you got to help me get her in my band. I think she'll become a star. She's that good." So we went to her mother. We went to her pastor, and we talked. And I said, "My ex-wife, who was the same age as her, we'll take care of her." I was only uh,
Mm-hmm.
26, and she was 23. And so she went on the road. And after the first week, the first day she was in my band, we played at Birdland.
Wow.
Charlie Parker came in and heard her play and offered her a job.
Wow.
I figured I'm going to lose Charlie Parker, God, what am I going to do? And anyhow, she was my band for 4 years. She never left my band.
That's great. No, and there's that
And
video
then
that's
Pat
passed.
Moran was there almost 2 years. And I put her in the Dream Band. She played with a few albums. And then with Alice Coltrane, I was out in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I got divorced and I moved back. And I called Herman Wright, who played bass with me with Terry Pollard. And I said, "Herman, I'm going to start a band. If you could think of any players." And he said, "Yeah, Terry, this is on the phone." He said, "When you get home, I'll tell you about it." I got to New York. I got myself straightened out with a hotel room. And I called Herman. He says, "Terry, you won't believe it. There's another girl from Detroit who sounds that good. I mean, she plays different than Terry, but she plays like Bud Powell." I said, "I'll audition. Let me hear her." And then somebody told me about a drummer called John Dents, a young kid who came, and I auditioned him and Terry at the same time. He sounded great. He went on to play with Supersax later on, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I listened to Alice Coltrane, Alice McLeod at that time, and in 4 bars, or once again 8 bars, you could tell somebody is good. You could
Right.
tell immediately. Anyhow, so I hired her. She was my band of the year. Near the end of the year, I got the biggest job in my life at a place called the London House. London House that only hired piano players like Errol Garner, Oscar Peterson, Nat King Cole. It was a piano. my old agent called me. He says, in a month I got your quartet. You can open the London House. Anyhow, Alice and my band. Now we're working it opposite John Coltrane. I met John here in California when I had the Dream Band. He and the Miles Davis group came out. We did a festival together, and they were all my friends from New York. So we hung out, and we went on tour for a few days with the Dream Band and Miles's group. And we get to New York, and I saw Alice. There was a table at Berlin that faced the back of the bandstand, so they never could sell that to anybody. So that's where the band would sit. They wanted to stay there and hang out at the club. And Alice, I see Alice sitting there every set that John played. She'd sit there and listen, and she looked like she was falling in love with John. Now, John is shy, and Alice is very shy. So I introduced them, and I saw a love affair happen. John came on a road and joined us for a job. No hanky panky. He got in one room, she with another. And then about a week before we had to open the London House, Alice came to me and said, Terry, John wants to get married. He wants me to join him in Europe. I said, wait a minute, my biggest job. Now, if anybody but Alice Coltrane or Alice McCollum, anybody such a sweet lady, I would hire my attorney Bernie and sue her immediately, because the biggest job I ever had. I taught her how to play fives. She was playing fives and all. But anyhow, that marriage went on, and every time I'd see Robbie, who was very close with Jerry, I told Robbie he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me, he owes me his life.
That is an amazing story. So I'm going to find that there's that. Well, going back to Terry, there's that famous video of you two with the playing with each other, the shoving match kind of video.
Yeah, right.
I'll put that in. I do show notes for this, and this also gets released as a podcast. So I will put that. I'll find the link to that and put it in the notes, along with your link to the book. It's called Good Vibes: A Life in Jazz, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
and I'll put a link to that. You can get it on Amazon. It's hardcover, and it's only $15. So and we've already sold one tonight. So. But let me just do a couple more shout outs. We got 2 more tips that came in.
Well, who bought it for $15?
Well, it says 15 on Amazon.
It had to be used because it's selling for $65.
Oh, yeah. Well, it says 17 used from $10.37. 14 new.
That's what maybe, but not on Amazon. It wasn't.
No, I'm looking at Amazon right now, and they've got 14 new ones from starting at $15.14.
I got to buy it myself. I don't have a copy anymore.
I'm going to buy one and drive over and have you sign it.
Yeah, okay. You live so close to my house, Billy.
I know, we're super close. I actually came over there once. You needed to replace the
yeah, I don't. This Yamaha gave me a set of vibes, and I don't. It's never been taken apart ever that I know of. I never know how to put it together. I know how to take it apart.
But a couple other shout outs. Oh, Howard sent a tip in, and Howard had a great line. He said, let me see if I can find it now. He said, having Terry Gibbs at the round table was a thrill. He's such a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I learned the real story behind his music store in Canoga Park. So that's great. And then we also got tips from April and Kathy. Kathy has her own talk show. She does it like 5-7 days a week, something crazy like that. But it's really good to see Kathy here. And she had George Cables on today. I guess he had a lot of great stories as well. Yes. So I'll have to connect you guys, and you'd love her. She's great at the interviewing thing. But okay, I did have one other question. Well, I had 2 from Taylor, but I'm going to pick this one. He was wondering if you had any thoughts on jazz education in schools. Do you think it's currently going in the right direction, or do you know have any comments?
You know what? Sometimes the teacher can get too involved. It's good to learn how to read music. Mm-hmm. It's good to get, but harmony and theory is to play jazz takes 2 things for me. First of all, without technique, you can't play. I'm a bebopper, so I'm talking about bebop, playing all those notes and hearing what they play. You have to have the technique. Plus, you have to know harmony and theory. So if you see a C7 in the chord, you just don't have to play a C7. You can take it apart and play a G minor to C to C to D flat to F sharp to F. You resolve. Take it apart, learn that chord, learn all your scales, learn all your chords backwards and forwards. That's what But as jazz players, I there are for some reason I don't find as many good jazz players as I do them playing in a section. They can read the heck out of the music,
Hmm.
but you got to do both. If you want to be a jazz player, you got to. Well, if big bands ever come back, you got to play with the big band. Even when you play the little band, people are writing arrangements a little band, but you got to learn harmony theory up and backwards,
Well, I
and
always thought,
learn your instrument. Learn that instrument, boy. Practice and get that scale.
yeah, when we were talking about how you were playing 6, 7 nights a week for 6 months straight on the road, and then you learn about the guys in New York City that were playing 8 hours a night and things like that, as opposed to these days, it's hard to find that much work. But yeah, you're right. It's the hours behind the instrument.
Oh yeah, you know it's also the experience. If you want to play, you got to play with better players.
Hmm.
When I was learning how to play, I would go to jam sessions, and it'd be guys who knew a little more about bebop than I did.
Hmm.
I caught on, but I would go down here, Bird and Diz. I was lucky I was there in New York, hearing Bird Diz and Bud Powell. I was hearing the masters. I was getting from the horse's mouth, as they
Hmm.
say. I was getting, and I heard what they did, and I didn't want to copy them, but I wanted, I, I would copy things that Dizzy Gillespie played, then I would turn it around and do it my own way.
Right.
I play that lick syncopated with different notes. I would use the syncopation more than I would the notes that he played. So there's all kinds of ways that you learn how to play jazz. Listen a lot, play a lot, play with better players if you can.
Yeah. But now, this is kind of jumping around from that. But when you came to L.A., you were also a music director for several TV shows.
Yes, I
And this,
moved. Actually, I moved when I had Alice Coltrane. I moved back to New York,
mm,
and she left. I got Walter Bishop Jr. on piano, and then I got a call. I used to be a guest a lot on Steve Allen's show,
hmm.
and the producers loved me because they love my rapport with Steve because I can't act really. If it don't come out of my mouth, I can't read it. I have to.
Yeah.
You gotta let me say it my way, or I can't do it.
Right.
And so Steve Allen quit Westinghouse like this, and the producers found this young kid in San Diego called Regis Philbin. He was in a count. Now it was a syndicated show, so they had shows in the can like for 2 weeks.
Right.
Every show, but they would have to start a new show now. So he called me from New York and asked me if I'd like to audition for that job. And little did I know, but I think Bobby Troop, maybe Ray Anthony were up for that job. And I'm just like I am with you. I say the dumbest things, and I was saying all these dumb things to Regis Philbin, and
Hmm.
he loved me. I
Yeah.
would I would do my Don Rickles shtick. I might say, "That's not funny, Regis," and he loved when I would say that. He loved when and so they hired me because I'd be the second banana. Now, Steve Allen had a 9-piece orchestra, so they said to me, "We'll give you a 9-piece orchestra." So I said, "No, I don't want it. You either give me a big band because we're opposite Johnny Carson, who had 16 pieces
Right.
with Doc Severinsen, and back east there's another big show with a 16-piece orchestra. You either give me 16 or give me a sextet." He said, "A sextet? Can you do it with a sextet?" I said, "Sure," because the guests that come on to sing, the most important thing is a rhythm section.
Hmm.
I knew if I got a good rhythm section, I'm in good shape. I'll get
Right. Right.
a
Right.
guy who'll play all the reeds and be vibes, be good sound. We either tenor vibes, flute and vibes, clarinet
Hmm.
vibes. And I had Mike Milvine on piano, Colin Bailey on drums, and Monty Broderick on bass, and Herb Ellis on guitar. And you couldn't do any better with a rhythm section.
Wow. That's great.
And then
Well.
from that show, the guy who was the associate producer, they were starting a new show called Operation Entertainment, which called for a big band.
Hmm.
And I got that job and did that show for about 37 weeks. And Steve Allen called me, and I got that job for about 17 years. And I had a good television run.
That's great. So,
Hey, Billy, I'm gonna have to. I know we didn't get to any of the questions.
we'll have you back, Terry, if you want to come back. I think
I
people
can
would
come
love
back
to
in
hear.
an hour. I can come back in 3/4 of an hour and finish yours.
No, I've got things to do, but
Okay.
I'll
Yeah, I'd love to come back and do some more with you.
that'd be great. And thank you so much. Let's have a big hand for Terry Gibbs. There he is.
I wish I could have answered all your questions, but I
Well,
told you
we'll do it again.
I
And
told you it was a proper conversation.
We'll definitely have you back. And just you got so many great comments. People love the stories, especially the Alice and John
Well, what do
stories.
they know? What do they
Yeah,
know?
what do your fans know?
I
Terry?
thank them very much.
No.
It's always nice when people like what you do. Whether you're a shoemaker and you fix your shoes good, or you play five or trumpet or tell. And I love telling these stories because I was blessed to have a great 80-year career in playing music. I was blessed. I wish everybody can be blessed that way. I work all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyhow, Billy, it's great doing it for you.
Thank you. It's an honor having you on, Terry. I had the idea a couple of months ago. I go, man, I got to call Terry. I got to call Terry. And this is great. And then, so I'm telling you right now, we'll have him back before the end of the year. So everybody buy the book and read the whole thing. And then we'll try to find stories that aren't in the book so you can tell us about those.
And we'll never get past the first story because it's become a conversation game.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
Billy.
we won't get past the
Thank you,
next-
everybody.
Have a good night, Terry.
All right,
Thank you. I'm
you
going to
too.
play the outro, and we'll see you guys Thursday night if you can come by. All right. Good
Take
night,
care.
everyone.
Thanks for joining us at Live at 0 BPM. These videos will be archived on YouTube and Facebook, so tell your friends. These Jazz Roundtable shows will also be released as a podcast, so please subscribe. Coming up on Thursday, July 1st, it's the Nick Gomez Quartet featuring Nick Gomez, Michael O'Neill, Miguel Martinez, and Colton Knobb. Showtime, 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific. And as always, it's free, though donations are greatly appreciated. Go to live@0bpm.com for details and to sign up for our mailing list. Also, find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. See you soon.